The early morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the busy airport terminal. Travelers shuffled past each other, wheeling their luggage and clutching coffee cups, trying to shake off the exhaustion from the long hours of waiting. The intercom crackled to life with the familiar announcement. Flight 272 to Los Angeles is now boarding. Among the throng of passengers making their way toward the boarding gate was Claire Hendricks, a well-dressed woman in her mid-40s. She was returning from a business trip in New York, and she was not in the mood for anything less than a first-class experience. Claire had worked her way up in her career over the years, and she had grown used to the privileges that came with her success. Executive lounges, first-class flights, and seamless check-ins. As she approached the boarding gate, Claire's sharp blue eyes scanned the other passengers. There was a mix of people, families, solo travelers, businessmen, but something, or rather someone, caught her attention. A tall black man stood near the gate, casually dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans, his suitcase at his side. He was on his phone, speaking softly, but something about him irked Claire. A small frown creased her perfectly made-up face as she muttered under her breath, "Typical." Despite her discomfort, Claire pushed the thought aside. First-class seats were assigned, and she would surely have her own space to relax. She handed her ticket to the attendant, who smiled and wished her a pleasant flight. When Claire boarded the plane and entered the first-class cabin, she felt her irritation return almost immediately. There, in seat 3A, the very same black man was settling into his seat. "No, no, no," Claire muttered to herself. Her seat was 3B, right next to his. She immediately turned to the flight attendant, her voice tight with frustration. "Excuse me," Claire said. "I need to change my seat. I can't sit here." The flight attendant, a young woman named Julie, looked at her with confusion. "Is something wrong with your seat, ma'am?" Claire leaned in and whispered harshly, "I don't want to sit next to him." Julie's eyes widened in surprise. "Ma'am, we don't change seats based on other passengers. You're in first class and the seats are assigned." Claire huffed, her face flushed with indignation. "There must be another seat available. I'm a frequent flyer and I don't think this is appropriate." Julie sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm afraid the flight is full, ma'am. There's nothing I can do. Please take your seat." Feeling defeated but still seething, Claire shot a glare at the man already sitting in 3A, who hadn't even glanced her way. With a dramatic sigh, she sank into her seat, her movements tense and stiff. The man remained focused on his phone, seemingly unaware of the tension building beside him. As the plane took off, Claire tried to relax, but her discomfort persisted. Every small movement or sound from the man beside her made her bristle. She could smell the faint scent of cologne on him, clean and subtle, but she found herself irrationally annoyed by even that. Half an hour into the flight, the man took out a book, a thick one with a leather cover. Claire glanced sideways, trying to see what he was reading, but the title was obscured. She let out a quiet scoff. Probably nothing worthwhile, she thought. The flight attendant returned to offer drinks, and Claire ordered a glass of wine, hoping it would calm her nerves. When the attendant turned to the man next to her, she was surprised to hear him speak in a deep, calm voice. "Just water for me, thank you." Claire almost rolled her eyes. He's probably trying to be healthy. Of course. The man thanked the flight attendant with a polite smile, and then his eyes briefly met Claire's for the first time. His gaze was warm and friendly, but Claire quickly looked away, not wanting to engage. Hours passed, and the cabin grew quieter as some passengers settled in for naps, while others watched movies on their tablets. Claire tried to distract herself with her work, but she couldn't shake her unease. The presence of the man next to her felt overwhelming, even though he had done nothing to provoke it. It wasn't long before Claire's frustration got the best of her. She pressed the call button, summoning the flight attendant once again. "Yes, ma'am? Is there something I can do for you?" Julie asked politely. "I told you I didn't want to sit here," Claire whispered harshly, trying not to disturb the other passengers. "I know you must have an open seat somewhere in coach." Julie blinked, clearly taken aback by the request. "You want to move to coach, ma'am?" "Yes, I do," Claire said through gritted teeth, as if the thought of staying any longer was unbearable. The flight attendant hesitated for a moment but nodded. "Let me check." Claire folded her arms tightly across her chest, tapping her foot impatiently. The black man glanced at her again, this time with a slight frown of curiosity, but he said nothing. After a few moments, Julie returned, her face apologetic. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but coach is full as well. There really aren't any other seats." Claire's face flushed with irritation. She was trapped. She didn't respond to the flight attendant, who quickly walked away, sensing Claire's growing displeasure. As the flight continued, Claire found herself growing more restless. Her thoughts were consumed with frustration, and she kept replaying the situation in her head. How could this happen? How could she be expected to sit next to someone like him? She was Claire Hendricks, a woman of status, a person who had worked too hard to be subjected to this. But as the hours passed, something began to change. The man beside her hadn't caused her any trouble, hadn't even spoken to her beyond a polite greeting. He had spent most of the flight either reading or quietly working on his laptop, minding his own business. As the flight neared its end, an announcement came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into Los Angeles. Please fasten your seatbelts." Claire was relieved, eager to get off the plane and put the entire experience behind her. She couldn't wait to be away from the man beside her and back in the comfort of her routine. But as the plane began its descent, something unexpected happened. Julie, the flight attendant, approached the man in 3A with a bright smile. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice filled with awe. "I just wanted to say how much I admire your work. My son is such a big fan." The man looked up, surprised but gracious. "Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you to say." Claire frowned, glancing sideways at the man. Was he someone important? She had no idea who he was, but it seemed like the flight attendant did. "Would it be all right if I got an autograph for him?" Julie asked, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Of course," the man replied with a warm smile. Claire watched in disbelief as the flight attendant handed the man a pen and a small piece of paper, which he signed with ease. Julie thanked him profusely and walked away, clearly thrilled. Curiosity gnawed at Claire, but her pride kept her from asking who he was. Instead, she discreetly glanced at the piece of paper the man had signed, hoping to catch a glimpse of his name. Her eyes widened as she read the signature. Dr. Marcus Evans. The name sounded familiar, but Claire couldn't quite place it. She spent the next few minutes racking her brain, trying to figure out where she had heard that name before. Then, it hit her like a ton of bricks. Dr. Marcus Evans was a renowned neurosurgeon, one of the most respected in the world. He had pioneered groundbreaking surgeries and treatments that had saved countless lives. He was frequently featured in medical journals and had even appeared on major news networks discussing his work. Claire's stomach dropped as the realization set in. The man she had been so desperate to avoid, the man she had judged based solely on his appearance, was one of the most accomplished and respected professionals in his field, and she had treated him with nothing but disdain. As the plane touched down in Los Angeles and the passengers began to disembark, Claire felt a wave of shame wash over her. She had spent the entire flight resenting this man, all because of her own prejudices and assumptions. And now she knew the truth. He was someone far more accomplished and important than she could have ever imagined. When the seatbelt sign turned off, Claire hesitated for a moment before turning to Dr. Evans. She began, her voice faltering. "I'm sorry." Dr. Evans looked at her, his expression calm but unreadable. "Sorry for what?" he asked, though it was clear he knew what she meant. Claire felt her face burn with embarrassment. I shouldn't have judged you. I didn't realize who you were." Dr. Evans studied her for a moment before nodding slowly. "It's not about who I am. It's about how you treat people regardless of who they are." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Claire felt her heart sink. He was right. It wasn't about his title or his achievements. It was about the simple fact that she had judged him without knowing anything about him. She had let her biases cloud her judgment, and now she was paying the price for it. "I understand," she said quietly, her voice thick with regret. Dr. Evans gave her a small, kind smile, but he didn't say anything else. He gathered his things and stood up, leaving Claire to grapple with the weight of her actions. As he walked away, Claire realized that this moment would stay with her for the rest of her life. It wasn't just about one flight or one man. It was about her own need to confront the prejudices she had harbored for so long. In the weeks that followed, Claire couldn't stop thinking about Dr. Marcus Evans and the lesson he had unintentionally taught her. She had always considered herself a successful, open-minded woman, but that flight had forced her to confront a darker side of herself, a side she wasn't proud of. Claire began to make changes in her life, both big and small. She sought out opportunities to educate herself about the experiences of people from different backgrounds. She started volunteering with organizations that promoted diversity and inclusion, and she made a conscious effort to be more aware of her own biases. But more than that, Claire learned to approach people with kindness and openness, regardless of who they were or what they looked like. It wasn't always easy, but she knew it was the right thing to do. One day, months after that fateful flight, Claire received an invitation to a prestigious medical gala. As she scanned the guest list, her heart skipped a beat when she saw Dr. Marcus Evans's name among the attendees. When the night of the gala arrived, Claire felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. She knew she might run into Dr. Evans again, and this time, she hoped to show him the person she had become since their last encounter. Sure enough, as she mingled with the crowd, she spotted him across the room. Dr. Evans was deep in conversation with another guest, but when their eyes met, he gave her a small nod of recognition. Claire took a deep breath and approached him. "Dr. Evans," she said, her voice steady, "I just wanted to say thank you." He raised an eyebrow, clearly curious. "Thank me for what?" "For teaching me something I needed to learn," Claire replied, her tone sincere. Dr. Evans smiled softly, understanding her unspoken words. "I'm glad to hear that." And with that, they exchanged a brief but meaningful handshake, a gesture that carried the weight of change, growth, and redemption. As Claire walked away, she felt lighter, knowing that she had not only learned a valuable lesson, but had also taken the steps to become a better person because of it.